U.S. Senator Roy Blunt. Hi, Roy.
Hey, Fawn, nice to be with you this morning. I hope it's a great day in Cape Girardeau in southeast Missouri.
It is, always is. We've had the best weather, I think, ever this year. I'm looking forward to baseball tonight with my grandkids.
Well, that's good. That's good. Baseball is, Cardinals are back in the first place, I think, and, it's good to have something to think about that's positive because the Senate of the United States, where I go every day, is certainly not getting anything done. But I don't think that can last beyond this year. I think people are really looking at what the government needs to do, and they see this as a big decision-making year. And we're going to be talking today about the fact that there hasn't been a Senate-passed budget, the one that's required by law every year. The Senate hasn't passed a budget for 3 years now. And you can't do most of the funding work of the government in the right way if you don't have the budget document to start with. It's just a fundamental, legally required thing that the current Senate has failed to do, and I hope that this is the last year ever that the Senate doesn't have a budget. They had one every year from the Budget Control Act until 3 years ago. Didn't always agree with the House on the budget, but at least the Senate would pass one, and the House has always passed one, with one exception, and that was the second year Nancy Pelosi was Speaker. But it's an important time, and it's a big debate, and I'm glad to be part of it.
Yeah, and I know that they can't blame the Republicans because the Democrats are in charge of the Senate, so that's kind of a catch-22 for you because a lot of people are trying to blame you.
Well, it is, the majority does matter, and my side is 3 votes away from 50. I guess the 50 and the vice president would be the majority, or we're 4 votes away from 51. And for a lot of things, Vaughn, it takes 60 votes in the Senate to get things done.
Right.
But the budget only takes 51 votes. It's something that the majority could do by themselves if they wanted to, and they're just not what they're for. In fact, we're going to force a vote on the president's budget, but the majority, that the Democrats in the Senate that by themselves could pass the president's budget won't bring the president's budget up for a vote because they don't want to admit what they're for to the American people. It's an amazing thing. I've never seen anything like it in Washington or really in the history of our government. We've never had a majority that was so willing just not to do the work that has to be done.
And due to a time limitation here, I did promise listeners we'd talk about Bird's Point Levee. Are you pushing for full restoration, Senator?
Oh, absolutely I am, and I think we're well on the way to getting that done. I'm frustrated it isn't done already. My view with the Corps of Engineers a year ago was if you're going to execute the plan I understand is to take this down in an emergency, but it's also to be able to put it back up. And if you can't put it back up, don't take it down. And I still think that was a mistake, a costly one in many ways. And at the same time, it does look like we're going to have a spring this year that lets us get by with a 55-foot or so levee at Bird's Point as we work hard. And I keep insisting that the Corps get that back to 62 feet. Joanne Emerson and Claire McCaskill have both also been insisting that we get that levee back to where it's supposed to be and get it done as soon as possible.
And what do we need from Washington for that to happen? What are you doing? How are you pushing for that?
Well, I talked to the general in command of the Corps just last week, and we've been talking to them every week for a year about where are you, how are you going to do this, when are you going to get it done, and the Mississippi River Commission has voted to go ahead and bring that up to the 62 feet level again. There was some early discussion, Fawn, that they didn't want to get that levee back until the levees on the other side of the river that in their view protect more property were in the shape to handle the water if it pushed the water that way. But for whatever series of reasons, they're now prepared to get this done. And I spent quite a bit of August last year in the Boot Heel and several days in the Birds Point area. I'm going to be back there again this year, walking on that levee, seeing that the Corps is getting done what they need to do. And I think generally the Corps has not managed the river as well as they should, either the Mississippi or the Missouri, and particularly in the Missouri River. The spending of money does not reflect the so-called priorities of the river, which should be flood control number one. And if you looked at the budget for the Missouri River, you'd never guess that flood control was the number one priority. You'd guess it was buying farmland and turning it back into wildlife habitat was the number one priority of the Missouri River. And, of course, all that eventually runs right by Cape Girardeau as it gets to the Mississippi and comes down the Mississippi.
So how can people find out what the progress of this is other than the news reports that we do? We stay on top of it, but is there a way the people who live in that area can follow the progress of what the Army Corps of Engineers is planning?
You know, I don't know if there is a website, a Corps website or not, but everybody will breathe easier once we get beyond the month of May, I think. I'm going to be on the river, on the Missouri River, in late May, looking at the upriver reservoirs to see what our plan here. But if we get beyond May without a flooding situation, and it looks like we're likely for that to happen, then, you know, we're just looking at every day how much can you add to that levee that gets it up to the area it needs to be at. And when I talked to the Corps last week, they made the commitment that if it does get to where it's over the current levee size, that they intend to get into what's called the flood fight and just with sandbags or whatever else is necessary to do the work that needs to be done. And I can assure you that Joanne Emerson and I will be talking about that. I think Senator McCaskill will, too. This is one thing that our delegation is unified on, and if I was concerned about that, I'd be watching it all summer, and I'd be asking about Thanksgiving, okay, are we to the point we need to be at where we can finish this before the winter weather makes it impossible to do, though the winter weather at Birds Point is not the problem that the winter weather is in a lot of our river areas in our state. So I think we're going to get this done, and I'm insisting we get it done. I wish they hadn't taken the levee down a year ago. I think that was letting the water come over the levee would have done the job that needed to be done and not destroyed nearly the property and cropland that had to be put back in place.
He's U.S. Senator Roy Blunt. We're completely out of time. Roy, thanks for joining us today, and let us know how things look when you get there.
Well, I will, and thanks for the great job you do every day as people are having their coffee and thinking about what's going on. I know they like listening to you, and I was glad to be with you today. I look forward to doing it again soon.
Okay, give us a holler. Thanks, Roy.